welcome to My SheEO Stories, the signature session of the Maritime SheEO Conference. I have with me 4 beautiful, strong women whom I look up to. I'm very honored to say that a lot of them are friends and mentors, and we would like to start the session by having them introduce themselves and telling us a little bit about their background. Can we start with you, Karin?
Yes, of course. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. It's an honor and pleasure to join this session, what's called Maritime SheEO, and I loved to play with the wordplay that Sanjam and her team did. My name is Karin Orsel. I'm a ship owner and ship manager from the Netherlands. I started my own company when I was 23 years young. Not old, young, I would say. Nowadays, I have a fleet around 60 vessels in different segments. And besides having my own company, I am the chair of the Dutch Ship Owners Association. I am one of the ex-com members of Stanzel of Intertanko. I'm also a board member of the International Chamber of Shipping, and BIMCO, and something which is very close to my heart, and namely that's a trustee for the ICE One, which is a network to assist our seafarers. And I want to keep it brief because I love to have an open discussion, and you can ask me anything except my PIN code, Sanjam.
Thank you, Karin. That was a lovely introduction, and I think that could go on and on. There are so many titles and there are so many things that you do. I think the list is endless, but for now we'll go to Mrs. Joshi and ask her to tell us a little bit about herself.
Hi, Sanjam. Thank you so much for inviting us to be a part of Maritime SheEO. I think it's indeed a privilege for our generation to be interacting with all the young folk out there. And I also need to thank you for providing me personally this platform where I come to know of the other accomplished ladies across the globe. This is one opportunity, one platform where we really come to know and share our thoughts across various zones, and not only the time zones, different cultures. And I think this, Sanjam, is true diversity. It's the diversity is only not in terms of the gender. It's the diversity is in terms of culture, creed, habits, practices. I think that is true diversity. So I really need to thank you from the bottom of my heart from bringing 4 diverse women onto one platform. And let's see how many common things we are going to be sharing with each other. So personally, I am Harjeet Joshi. I am currently the chairperson and managing director of Shipping Corporation of India Limited, which is by far the largest national shipping company of the country and also the most diversified shipping company. I also hold the additional charge of Director Finance in the company. I've been playing both the roles for more than a year. I currently sit on multiple boards of several domestic as well as international companies. I'm also on the board of the 4 LNG joint ventures that the company has. I'm also on the board of the P&I Club, Standard Club, and also on the board of Standard Asia Limited, along with a host of other, I don't want to start narrating the list out here, but that I think, Sanjam, should be a good beginning, and the rest I think is going to unfold as we're going to chat along.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Kathy, can we hear from you now?
Sure, thank you so much, Sanjam. And like Karin and Joshi, it is an absolute pleasure and an honor to be part of this event and to actually take part in something that I think will affect many, many people's lives in a good way. And I think that's one of the things hopefully we will bring out during this discussion. There are so many things in life that are unpredictable, and there are so many things in life that we cannot control. But one of the things we can do is control our reaction to those things happening in life. And I think all of us probably will find that we have done that in a certain way, and that can help other people. So it's an absolute honor to be part of this group. My name's Kathy Stanzel. or Katharina Stanzel. If I've done anything badly, that's what my mother calls me, Katharina. I'm German. I grew up in Germany, went to school there, started my career there as a scientist. So I studied biology. And then my first failure occurred. I wanted to be an astronaut with the European Space Agency, and I didn't speak English well enough. So that's really what launched me into a completely different direction. And you asked the question earlier, did we ever intend to be where we are today, or did we ever envisage that? I certainly didn't. I thought I would be a biologist. I ended up studying English, becoming a marine biologist instead, working in Indonesia and other places as a marine biologist. And then through various steps that maybe we can get into later, we don't have to, I ended up joining shipping as a scientist looking at pollution from ships, working for 10 years on trying to manage and mitigate any damage that would happen from pollution from ships, and then ending up doing the job that I'm doing now, running an association for ship owners. And Karin's already mentioned this. She's one of my board members, and I'm very honored to have her. But it's an association of ship owners that want to be the top of the top, the best of the best, the quality tanker owners that run the most efficient, cleanest, and best looked after fleets in the world to deliver services and deliver energy around the world. So it's an interesting job. It's quite challenging in the sense that my background is not shipping, my background is science, but there are a lot of parallels that I've taken into this job and a lot of things that I've learned in the past that I can apply to this job. So I've been doing it for 10 years now. And thank you for having me again.
Thank you, Kathy. Poroma, we'd like to hear from you now.
And thank you, Sanjam.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sorry, I interrupted.
No, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Sanjam. It's a pleasure, it's a privilege and an honor to be part of this very august group of ladies. And it's such a pleasure to meet people, you know, beyond our own country. And there's just so much to learn. And I think this is a very special day, particularly working from home, I think is a challenge. And then to be able to interact internationally like this, I'm really honored. And thank you, Vivek, for the recording. I appreciate it. As I mentioned earlier, Sanjam is my role model. She's one of the most amazing young ladies I have seen in the maritime sector. And I'm sure she will go places and take a lot of young talent with her. Briefly about myself, I'm the proud daughter of an Indian Air Force officer. And that is my primary introduction. My name is Poroma, Munshi Rebello. My father was in the Indian Air Force. My mother was a school teacher. We are two sisters. My elder sister, she's a professor. She studied and mainly lived in Europe. And I was always the naughty one who didn't study. And, you know, parents worried about me all the time. But long story short, our parents never, ever made us feel we were girls and that there are boys. There was never any activity or any kind of gender sensitization, for want of a better description, that we ever faced. If there was a bucket to be lifted, we would lift it. If there was, in fact, I'm fairly technically inclined. I mean, if there are bulbs to be changed, if there's, you know, stuff to be done, there was never a hint of, don't you think you should go to the kitchen? So quite honestly, it's not something that I even noticed when I was growing up. It's only when I came into the workplace that I realized that there are gender differentiations. And I think, and I thank my parents, I really won the parent lottery. My sister and I won the parent lottery because I feel that my upbringing is what has brought me to where I am today. So I started my career as a journalist and I wanted to change the world through my writing. In those days, there was not a lot of media journalism, but I did start as a journalist, but that was fairly short-lived. And as far as coming to the maritime industry, which is one of the questions that Sanjam had, it was really by chance. after I got married, I accompanied my husband. We were in Delhi. I accompanied my husband to then Madras, the erstwhile Madras, now Chennai. And the first thing I did was to look for a job. And interestingly, a friend put me in touch with a shipping company. And the words of advice that were given to me, I will never forget at my first interview, was never, ever join the shipping industry. So it's been a journey of 26 years since then. And I was told that there is a glass ceiling which is not invisible. It's a very visible glass ceiling. And no, women do not ever break that glass ceiling. And I'm so proud to see and be part of this group of women who have not only broken the glass ceiling, but I think we've created a ceiling of our own. So today, interestingly, after 26 years in the maritime industry with the same company, I joined at a junior level and worked my way up to a regional director level across geographies. I moved after 26 years into a related logistics space. And now I'm commercial director with a rail company, a private container rail operator in India. It really brings together the entire supply chain in terms of my knowledge base. And I think it's been a great for the last 4 years to be part of the rail sector, which now includes warehousing and the road sector and container freight stations and so on. So, but the majority of my work life has been in the maritime industry, in the same company, and interestingly, even where I am now, it was the same group. So it's 31 years, you can say, with the erstwhile group. And it's been the most exciting until today. I'm amazed at the amount I learn. I'm also co-chairperson of the Inland Council of National Waterways of ASSOCHAM, the Associated Chambers of Commerce, and member of the Ports Council, Ports and Logistics Council. And I'm sure as we go along, we can share more and learn more about each other. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You know, initially when I was planning the session, I thought that I would introduce the speakers. But the reason why I asked each of you to kind of brag about yourselves is because I noticed that as women, we are told to kind of underplay ourselves, or we're expected. We don't tend to kind of talk about ourselves. We feel shy. So I think this was my way of kind of telling all those young women out there that it's okay to talk about your achievements and you shouldn't shy away from that. And Poroma, you've told us so much about your upbringing, and I know that you feel that your upbringing has had a great influence on what you are today. The same way, I think I would want to pose that to Karin. How was your upbringing and growing up? Did you ever think that I'm going to grow up to be this huge ship owner, and that's what my dream is. This is what I'm going to be. And do you look back on a little girl who's 8 or 10, and what was she thinking at that time? And how did she grow up into being this amazing personality in the maritime industry?
I think it's a very relevant and interesting question, and I really loved the story of Poroma because I recognize a lot of those things. I've been brought up in a very, what we would call protected area, or protected areas, not, but in a small town. And a small town would mean around 5,000 people only. So that is, you start smiling, I guess. So it's a small town. And I was always an outdoor person, and I think I still am. But as a child, I loved to play outside. So school or doing your maths was not something I was very interested in. As a consequence, and one of the other things which was interesting, I think, as well, even as a little child, if I saw somebody else wasn't able to do his maths, I was doing that for the person I was sitting next to. So I forgot my own homework. And the teacher then told me, hey, told my parents, Karin, she's not good. I hope she can do what we call housekeeping school. But even that level might be too high for her. And my parents both started smiling and said, okay, did you ever watch or know anything about Karin? Because obviously housekeeping tasks would not make her very happy. That's absolutely a no-brainer. So why don't we try something new, which was an economy school, and that was just new. And we all agreed that that might be something, let's test that out. Now, finance and fiddling around with figures is something I really like. So in the end, after the lower school, I did the middle school and then decided to take a big step to a city which has 15,000 people. And I had to study in a church, and then because that was the only available space. But that was only for 16 hours and the rest had to be self-study. Now, that is something which I think a lot of the next generation or the young people recognize, that they are used to do this. When I grew up, that was absolutely a no-brainer. So I decided, hey, it's nice to go outside again. So I didn't study at all. Has this had any influence on my whole career? I don't think so. It's actually a positive thing because my parents encouraged me to do what I loved, let me failure if there was a failure at all. And when I came back on my 18th back to the protected area surrounding and my hometown, I started just like Poroma by coincidence as a bookkeeper in a shipping company. And interesting enough, I kind of bluffed myself in there. And that's not something I think many of us do because we're very modest, as you rightfully said, Sanjam. So I bluffed my way in and I was a very good bookkeeper, I said. And now the joke I always made, but it's a sad one actually. 5 years after I entered that company, they were heading towards a bankruptcy. So from my 18th till my 23rd, I was the bookkeeper, and let us all hope it wasn't my creative bookkeeping that the company was heading into that direction. But I had no management influence, so I'm quite sure it wasn't that wasn't the case. But in those 5 years, I really, really fell in love with this industry and all the diversity we have, and diversity in the broadest way. So a lot of different cultural backgrounds, as was referred to. Not a day is the same. Every day a new challenge, because I don't like to use a different word. If there's a problem, to me it's a challenge, and let's see how we can solve that issue and come up with some alternative thinking. So that's in the end led to the fact that I was 23. Unfortunately for me, especially for my mother, but of course also for me, my father passed away when I was 21. So I had not a real mentor. I had no money, but I wanted to start up the own company. And the bank wasn't very happy with me either. I mean, look at, there's a young girl, what kind of experience does she have? Name it. But I decided to do it, and it has been the best choice of my life. And maybe we should leave it here, because otherwise I take too much time, Sanjam, and I would really love to hear from the rest as well.
And I think this is a natural progression, because Karin loved finance, and here we have Mrs. Joshi, who's a finance professional, and she's the first woman, CMD of the Shipping Corporation of India. And for those who do not know, since she has taken over, she has proved all her detractors wrong. I'm not sure if she's the first non-captain to take this position, but this is a point which has been raised very frequently as a point against her. But she's proven all of them wrong, because the results that they have thrown up, even in times of COVID, have been phenomenal. So, ma'am, we'd like to know about your personal journey, your upbringing, and to where you are today.
Sanjam, it's been so interesting listening to the other achievers over here. And I have just been trying to reminiscence and try and see there is so much of commonality. You might have been born across different regions.
Kathy, we want to know more in detail about you. I mean, when you were growing up, and I know that I heard your story, so I'm privy to it. And I don't know if everybody here knows it, but the first time I met Kathy was in 2013 in Montreal at the Vista conference. And till then, she seemed like this huge role model and unreachable. And at lunch, I was seated next to her. So I had this huge fangirl moment, and I actually remember taking pictures. I still have those pictures, and I sent it back home and I said, "Did you know who I had lunch with?" And she was so normal and down to earth and so easy to talk to. And I remember your story, Kathy. I think that time you got the personality of the year, and you were mentioning how you got into the industry by accident, and you told us a little bit about that. But can you share more details on how then that spiraled into a maritime career? And you're the managing director of Intertanko, and it's a powerful position, and people sit up when you tell them that. So how does that feel?
It feels embarrassing. And I told you that very honestly, and we've touched, I think, on that theme before. I don't see myself as somebody exceptional or special any more than any of us or any of the other women I meet, because I think I learn so much from anyone I meet, because everyone has their personal story, their personal challenges, and I think there's principles behind it that make us all unique and special. So I really didn't, the hero worship thing. I didn't know what to do with that at all. When I got the award, I was very humbled, and I completely went down the route of the imposter syndrome. I thought, but they will soon find out that I'm not the person that they think I am. I'm just a completely normal, very self-aware, very awkward kind of person. And it was only over the years that talking to a lot of other women in the industry that I realized actually these feelings are completely normal. The self-doubt is part of what makes us great, because we actually have that doubt and then we use it in our advantage rather than letting us be crushed by it. But to go all the way back to how I ended up there, I was born as an accident. So my parents were both very young and very foolish, and things happened, and suddenly the impossible happened, which led to a lot of family drama. My grandfather on my mother's side disinherited her and basically told her she had brought shame on the family and they had to leave, and she was not to see them again. And so I ended up being born to a very young couple that was only a couple because of me, because they made a mistake, where my mother was just finishing her studies as a teacher, but my father was in the middle of his training at the Academy of Arts and he had no income. So a very similar story to maybe Karin's about the not having money. That's a part of having to be independent. I take that from Mrs. Joshi as well. Very early on, I knew that I had to earn my keep. I had no right to be anywhere. I was not empowered by anything. And it wasn't until I was 6 that my siblings came along. So I was the oldest child, and then I had to take responsibility from an early age. And it is something that I think we take away in our personalities. So being responsible and having to earn your keep effectively is something that is a very powerful driver. Having that background, I then went on to a lot of failures in my life. The first one, not achieving to become an astronaut, that was the aim, but I found something better to do on the way. And I actually reflected on this. There's quite a lot of things that have led me to where I'm now that are actually, if you look at it from the other direction, failures. So I went to learn English in Australia, initially to become an astronaut. I discovered marine biology, which was completely fascinating. So I changed my career path completely. I then worked in Indonesia for years and I thought I'd be a marine biologist there. But the Asian crisis in the 90s made it impossible to stay there. So I returned to Europe with no money, experience, yes, but no prospect. So another failure. And then what happened, I guess, is part of that – story, I hope that many of us are feeling. Sometimes life throws things at you that could be a real challenge. And then if you turn it around, they become a fantastic opportunity. And in my case, it was exactly that. I came back to Europe after having worked in Indonesia for a number of years. I had no prospects as such, other than finding a job. Marine biologists in Germany don't get employed very easily. So there wasn't going to be a great job, but I went and took a temporary position over the summer in London to earn a little bit of money to then think about what I was doing in the future. And there was a newspaper advert for the job that I then did for 10 years following, which got me into the shipping industry. And it was a job that was looking at ship source pollution, as I said before, looking at how, as a scientist, I could minimize the damage when accidents happened on ships. And the minute I read the newspaper advert, I knew that was my job. My stomach knew it. And I think it's one of those things. It wasn't planned. So if you looked at it from a career advisory perspective, I didn't follow a path. I didn't go out and get my goal, not at all. I just looked at opportunities and took those opportunities. And it developed from there. So I worked for ITOP for 10 years. I had the opportunity to learn amazing things about shipping, about the people in shipping. Obviously, I also had the opportunity to make a name for myself because I met a lot of people, and so I became established in the industry. But then at the end of that period with ITOP, I was asked to work for the United Nations. And I thought, what honor that would be. When I was a little kid, one of my best friends at school, her auntie was a translator with the United Nations in Geneva. And I remember that we had the opportunity once on a holiday trip to go into the booth in the UN building in Geneva and see their work. And I was fascinated. I thought, wow, I actually want to work in this kind of environment, international, lots of very important people that know so many things I don't know. And then years and years later, I get an offer to work with the United Nations and get the blue passport, the diplomatic thing. I was absolutely thrilled. My dad was so proud, and I was proud about that. And within 12 months, I realized this wasn't a job for me. It was terrible. I was dying on the inside because it was all red tape. It was all administration. It was nothing that would fuel my passion. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to, what do I do with this? And it took me 18 months to make the decision to move because I was hanging on to this. No, this is what I wanted. I should pursue this. I must make this work. And I think over years of getting older and more experienced, I learned that actually our priorities change and life changes how we perceive the world and what we need out of the world. And then I'd met lots of interesting people, and through various, again, luck and opportunities, I then had an offer to take this position at Intertanko, and I doubted it a lot. The decision was not an easy one because I thought, well, here I am. I'm an international civil servant with the United Nations. That is what I always thought this would be, an amazing career. And I gave it up and I took the risk because I thought, actually, it's my stomach tells me this is better for me. And it was a good decision because I've learned so much since then. But it brings it back, I think, to the theme that I've heard a few times. You don't have to be the best at anything you do, but you have to follow your passion because that's going to make you really great. And I wasn't great at school. I excelled at those subjects that I was interested in, and I absolutely bombed at other subjects. I nearly failed school because I didn't study my Latin. But so there's all these kind of things. I think it's about trusting instincts and then taking opportunities when they arise. That sort of summarizes my career so far.
Thank you, Kathy. You are so humble, and that's something that I see in all of you, something in common with each one of you. I think that's it's a very rare quality because I know that a lot of times when people reach this position, and I'd like to say that as women, we're more humble. Maybe we can say that and be a little biased, but I wouldn't say that because after all, here we are talking about equality. And when I posted about the Maritime SheEO conference on LinkedIn, I had a gentleman put a comment, the name of your conference is Maritime SheEO, so you're already discriminating. And how can you talk about diversity? And I went back to him and said, the SheEO, it includes the he. So we're actually not discriminating.
Thank
you.
You
Want to hear thoughts about that? have you ever felt that, you know, you're a woman in this industry and it's all male dominated, but do you ever get the pat down your shoulder that, oh, the little lady? Have you ever been asked to make coffee when you were in the office? Any sort of instance that you felt that you were treated differently?
Sanjam, we know each other a little bit longer, so you know the answer, but let me share it with the rest. To be very frank and honest, no, I haven't. If that's related to the fact that I'm quite comfortable with myself and quite relaxed, maybe that's the case. I often volunteer to take the coffee, no matter if you're a man or a woman, or it. For me, it has nothing to do with my position, but I know that a lot of people have a different experience. But the only time I can recall is that I already took over the majority of the shares, so I was already the one in charge within this company. And I had a meeting with a gentleman who wanted to sell me something, and he was only focused on my colleague. I describe it nowadays. It's know your customer. That's a very big term these days, I think. But it says it all. I mean, if you don't know who you're going to do business with and focus on somebody who had no influence or no say within the company, to me that was the only reason to say, hey, this was a nice chat, but yeah, this is not going to work. And for the rest, no, I was actually just like Kathy, and I think some of us at times surprised that I was approached or asked to become a board member, for instance, within the Dutch Ship Owners Association. And I was asked by a gentleman who was a very tough cookie, and very harsh, and he was actually the one saying, hey, we need somebody else, somebody with a different view, and we need her to be a part of the board. And that is something I really, looking back, appreciate now. I was at that time completely surprised, and my first stupid comment was, do you mean me? And not because I was insecure, but it completely took me by surprise. And this is one of those lessons, I think, which we will end with. What are the lessons to be learned for everybody's either entering in this industry or even for people who work a little bit longer in this industry? But let's go to there a little bit later, and I hope Poroma has changed her background now, because I really would love to hear from her as well. Because as I said, Sanjam, it hasn't been the case with me. I tend to think it has to do with how I am in this world, but maybe Kathy can say something about that. She knows me a little bit better. But no, really never had any of those experiences. But it doesn't mean that I don't acknowledge that others have a different experience.
But I think that's the beauty of it, because sometimes we keep talking about the negative instances, but we should celebrate the positive instances, and the people that you met and the people who encouraged you and who did not look at you as a woman in the industry. So I think sometimes it's important to also hero those people and celebrate it, that yes, we are an industry that also welcomes women and does not treat you any differently. So I think that's great. And should we jump to Kathy now and then come back to Poroma?
Sure. I think actually I'd like to pick up on what you just said, because one of the commonalities maybe between the four of us that I think I heard is the role of our fathers in our self-belief and who we were able to be. And I think from my perspective, I didn't say this, but it's certainly true that because when I was very little, my mum was the one that she was the main breadwinner, because she already finished her studies. And so my father was still working at the academy as a student, but he was the one that would bring me to kindergarten and pick me up, and we would cook dinner together for mum. So I guess from an early age, for me, it was normal that sharing in a couple, for example, sharing the duties and responsibilities was possible. And I saw a lived example of that. So I think you said hero people, I think we should absolutely hero enlightened men in our lives generally, And if they become fathers, all the better. If they're mentors, that's great too. But we do need to have that, and that's where we come to diversity. We're best together. It's not one over the other. It's actually when you mix the two that it becomes really magical. And when you have the right attitudes. And I think to answer your question, maybe, have I had or have I seen discrimination against me in my career? Of course. But, and maybe as Karin has said, sometimes you just have to ignore that. So in my experience, for example, when I finished my studies in Australia, I came back to Germany with another couple of degrees from an Australian university, but it was long before the days of student exchanges. So my very, very staunchly male professor in Germany basically took one look at me and said, well, this is completely out of the ordinary. I don't know what to do with this. So you go back to the classes that you would have done 3 years ago. And I basically decided at that point that I wasn't going to do that. So he would have just insisted that I get back in my box and become the little student again. Whether that was because I was female or not, there was a very clear hierarchy for sure amongst research assistants, for example. But then it's the question of what you do with that and if you accept it. And I'm sure Karin has actually in her career experienced cases of this, but maybe she just either ignored them or chose to ignore them or just didn't realize they were actually there. She just didn't allow it to happen. And sometimes, where that's possible, maybe it's something we can try and do. Sometimes there is that, because we're of course all in a cultural context. The cultural context is so strong that we assume something will happen automatically. And it's really good to be aware of that.
Thank you, Kathy. So I think we'll jump to Mrs. Joshi first. And I know that she had some very interesting comments as part of my recent survey that we did in India for the business case for diversity, which was incidentally funded by the Dutch consulate, and Karin was there for the launch. She made some very interesting conversation, and she told, I want you to repeat that, what you said about what you should, do when people doubt you or when people treat you differently. Do you remember exactly what you said to me?
Sanjam, it would have come from my heart, so I will not remember because I never tutor my conversations. But I think I have missed talking about how I entered the maritime industry. So I think I'm lagging a bit behind as compared to my other members. So again, a commonality which you will very easily be able to trace amongst all the 4 women out here. For me, life was always a challenge. Like I told you, I'm picking up the story from where I left, that after my mother passed away, it meant that I have to get independent. And I think having an army background, I had a certain streak of being a fighter within myself. And I started immediately after my post-graduation. I was a rank holder, and you've seen all that is there on my website. But for the benefit of those who've not read the website, so having got a good position in the university, I immediately landed up with a permanent lecturership. And 1 year into the job, something very similar to what Kathy was saying. 1 year in the university teaching the undergrads, I realized that this is not my cup of tea. I mean, I can't just go on like this. I prepared for a class, and how many of the children out there are really serious about, I seem to be putting in more effort than all the students out there on the opposite side. And somehow I think that equality or equitable work concept was there in me. And I said, no, this cannot be a good teamwork where I'm working and slogging it out. And half of them are not even listening. They're just sitting here because they want the attendance. They don't care what I'm talking. So I said, I'm not going to lose my breath over this type of. So that was 1 year. That was 1983. And 1984, I appeared for a competitive All India exam, and I joined the Oil and Natural Gas Corporation, which is the largest mega oil and gas company in India. And 31 years I was with them. And all through, I have had various challenges. Initial period, I was posted in Dehradun, a young girl at 1980, in 1984, just 21 years, and I got posted. So it was unheard of in the family that once you have got a good permanent lecturership, teaching job was supposed to be best job for women. Why should she leave this and leave the home and go to a different station? She's already got a good financial package, so people could not understand. But like I said, my father just asked me, is that what you want? And I said, yes. I cannot suffocate myself in this. I can't see myself becoming a professor and just teaching children. I need something different. So he went and left me in Dehradun. He just wanted to check out whether there is going to be any other girl over there, just for the sake of company, not for any other reason. As luck would have it, on the list we had seen there is a girl, but when I went to join over there, the girl did not turn up, probably because of the same reason. And I happened to be the only girl in that entire batch of 39 other boys. Anyway, I joined. I got my induction training for 3 months, and I got a posting also in Dehradun. So I could not get back to Delhi at that time. After that, my journey started in ONGC Videsh Limited, which is the overseas arm of the Oil and Natural Gas Corporation. And believe me, Sanjam, because I was performing, somewhere I felt that I was given a more difficult task because they did not know how to eliminate me. Now they wanted to give me a more difficult task so that I buckle up, or I take the excuse or the pretext that, see, listen, I can't do this. And since I was working with the overseas arm of ONGC, there was a time zone issue right from my very young days, because when we were doing transactions across the globe, we had to match time zones. So when the West was morning, we were already into the evening. So I had to stay late if I had to do business. And they would put me on those assignments where the time zone gap was the maximum. And the second thing that they did was, they, of course, oil is, as you know, in the most godforsaken places, and God's been kind in certain regions. So you can't help but do business with those areas if you've got to be in the oil business. And Middle East was something which was chosen to be my primary area of business development. As a lady, young girl, I was just about 30 at that time. And you will not believe it, I've gone to any possible place in the Middle East that you can think of. I've traveled at that young age. And I've also traveled to Iraq for maybe more than a dozen times when it was a no-flying zone and there were no flights to Iraq. One had to go to Jordan, and from Jordan you had to take a 10-hour by road journey, and you can't even see a single blade of grass. And I was the only lady, and if you were not to be seen, nobody would even come to know you existed, because that's how people used to, that was the era in those 90s, if you can recollect what I'm talking about. So something common to what the other ladies were talking about, challenges was something which I think used to bring in that excitement to do it. And anything which was mundane and ordinary was something which never sort of caught my eye. A very comfortable job where I could have very comfortably bloomed, but complacency is something which was not my character right from the beginning. So having made my mark in ONGC, after that, I realized when I moved from ONGC Videsh on to, everybody told me, you've been a corporate person all along. If you sent on the project, you will not be able to work. So then came the challenge in 2007. I was sent on to Mumbai offshore, where it is a proper, most largest oil producing project. And they said, now let's see whether as a corporate woman you are able to survive in a project. And I think that is the time I told the management after every 1.5 years that please rotate me. I want to get the maximum experience that is possible. And by 2013, in 6 years, I had done an exploration experience. I had done a development asset. I had done the engineering services. I rotated myself, got all the experience. And 2013, I said, now I'm saturated. Now there is nothing more for me to learn here. And that is my entry into the marine world. And that is the time when this opportunity of a director finance advertisement came out for Shipping Corporation of India. And I put in my application. And of course, you know, it's a government selection process. This is a presidential appointment. I got appointed. And as you know, I was the first woman to be on the board of SCI. Not welcomed at all because it's a man's world. They were actually not comfortable. Again, I'll not accuse the other side. I've always been trying to be understanding why a person reacts the way that they do react. They're not used to you. They don't know how to handle you. They don't know how to treat you. They are uncomfortable with your presence. I don't think they have got anything against you per se. You per se means a woman. But it's like the men's team suddenly gets disrupted because now they've got a woman in the boardroom and they don't know how to handle her. And also, she's not somebody from the shipping fraternity, so she's not supposed to be understanding shipping. So these were the type of constraints that I faced. But you see, I've been smiling all through. And 2015, I joined Shipping Corporation. The appointment took some time because in 2014, you know that the NDA government came in, so there was a government change. Appointment took time. But from being a non-shippy, from being not having grown up into the maritime sector, I'm still smiling, all my bones intact, my head strongly on my shoulders, and no regrets whatsoever, and no complaints against anybody whatsoever, because I think it's something which they're not used to, and one needs to understand that, and it makes life much more easier if you make them comfortable rather than they're making you comfortable. And I think women have that capability, and that's exactly what I did in 2019 when I was elevated to the position of the chairperson. The challenge was for me to, of course, I'm the first woman CMD, but I was also the first woman even on the board as a director of finance. It was to make people believe in me and to ensure that I delivered what I promised I would deliver. And I think it's been a cakewalk after that in terms of, you've talked about it, excellent financials which SCI gave regardless of the pandemic. We worked all through the pandemic. We were not shut down even for one day. And it's been exactly 1 year now since my appointment as the chairperson. And I think now everybody does believe in my mettle. They know and understand that I'm very much a part of the shipping fraternity. I may have come from outside, but I had the adaptability and the urge to learn. And what drove me was what Kathy was talking about, challenge. So I think I left a haven in the oil sector after 31 years when you're deeply ingrained into a system. I realized one day it's exactly what Kathy was talking. Enough is enough. Now I need something more. You know, after a little while, I think we women, commonality which I've seen, we need a challenge. We need something to challenge ourselves. And that's exactly what I did. I left my safe haven. Everybody in ONGC advised me against joining. They told me at this age, you wanting to take a change, it's going to be a cultural change, an industry change, how you're going to be accepted. I said, that's where the challenge lies. And here I am. And you know the rest of it. For the last 5 years, at least you've been seeing me.
Thank you so much. That was really inspirational. And I think, Poroma, finally, we're coming to you, and we want to hear if there were, any time in the industry you felt that you were a woman, or was it more difficult for you? Did you feel treated any differently?
It's a very good question. And I think Mrs. Joshi, Kathy, Karin, We've all seen some of it in lesser or greater degree. So if you ask me, yes, when I joined the shipping company, and I consider myself basically somebody from the maritime industry, 26 years is a long time, I noticed that, not that I really noticed it then, but then today, when I look back, I noticed that there were no women in what I call senior operational roles. There were women in the soft skill roles, you know, the backroom kind of support functions, senior women, excellent women, but not really in the field. And that is not something which I noticed right then, but there was always a sense which I felt, and it was over a fairly long period of time, that girls or young women were not really taken very seriously. I mean, you may have been part of a round table, and you may be doing a round robin questioning, or you may be making, you know, there may be a presentation which people are talking about. But when it comes to something that a woman is saying, it is kind of indulged. But is it really taken seriously? I don't know. But that was then. If you ask me whether I was discriminated against being a woman, quite honestly, I never saw it like that. But in hindsight today, I will say certainly that there were times perhaps where, it could have been different. I don't want to take any specific examples because I owe a lot to the company that I have worked in. But as Mrs. Joshi rightly said, it is not about the individual. I think that people are generally uncomfortable around, the difference is what makes them uncomfortable. So what happens, I think we try to overcompensate and try to fit in, and as you have to. But what I found, my personal experience, was I started volunteering for the things which nobody else wanted to do, which were considered like dull as dishwater. I mean, So I would say, let me do it. And I would do it. And I would try to do it well. And slowly over time, what happens is that when you repeatedly start, no matter how small the job, if you keep volunteering, wanting to do a little more, and then doing it well, sooner or later, people start noticing that, hey, there is somebody that here is trying to make a difference. And so then from a small job, you get given something slightly bigger. And I will certainly say here that there is no place for humility. None. If you do something, please be proud of it. And if nobody else is going to blow your trumpet, please make sure you do it yourself, very loudly, because there's nobody there who's going to do it for you. And so that is exactly what I believe in the strength of networking. I believe in the strength of selling yourself appropriately. There is nobody who's going to do it for you. So as we all spoke about, that women tend to feel a little that, am I being considered aggressive? And aggressive is unattractive. Aggressive is just a word. Putting yourself out there, putting your best foot forward, showing what you can do is not aggression. It's the reality. It's your reality. Let people deal with it. Why should you have to deal with them? So that's my limited submission on being discriminated, not actively, but perhaps in spite of themselves, people have discriminated.
Okay, so we have heard like these amazing stories about positive and I think not exactly negative, but it kind of defines what we are as an industry. And I think there's a lot we can do to improve. And that's one of the reasons we're having the conference too. But before we end, I would want you all to tell me some advice that you would give to your 20-year-old self, because there are a lot of young women and a lot of young men out there who are listening to this this episode. And let's start with you, Poroma. What advice, if any, would you give to your 20-year-old self? If you look back now, what would you tell your 20-year-old self?
In this industry, my 20-year-old self would be a little repetitive of what I just said. I will always say volunteer to do more. And there is no shame in wanting to learn. Just excuse me. There is absolutely no shame in asking a question. There are no stupid questions. What I have, if I were to tell my 20-year-old self, I would say maybe a little less diffidence would be good in the initial. We all tend to be a little diffident. You know, am I overreaching myself? Am I speaking out of turn? Will I be misunderstood? It doesn't matter. You know, when you actually go through the days and the months and the years, nobody has really given a second thought to what you said or did. It's only you, the self-doubt must go. So I would tell myself, if I was 20 again and in the maritime sector, actually I would like to sail. I hope Mrs. Joshi will join me when we're both again 20. And I would actually like to sail, because that is one aspect of the industry which I haven't had the pleasure of doing. Other than that, whether it's, you know, port operations, or it's been, you know, maritime documentation, maritime laws, so on and so forth. So I have always had this, it's like a sponge. I've been like a sponge. I just want to know more. So yes, I think that is what I would tell a young woman or a man, that volunteer for the tough jobs. Please feel free to speak about yourself, network appropriately, be respectful of diversity of every sort, and don't look back. And as I said, I think we've all said that a defining relationship in our life has been that of our father. So I feel very happy to be among, you know, all of you, Karin, Kathy, Mrs. Joshi, Sanjam. We're all on the same path. And I really hope we can get to meet someday when all these very difficult times are over. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Karin, I'm waiting to hear what advice you're going to give your 20-year-old self.
I was wondering when you say, hey, Karin, what's your opinion? No, I think, and I'm quite sure that all four of us will say more or less similar things. But if I look back at when I started when I was 23, and if I'm 20 or 23, that age difference is not that big. To me, one of the most important things has always been treat others like you want to be treated. So have a lot of respect, no matter what the position is of the other person you're dealing with. Make sure that person feels respected, and because you also want it to be respected, no matter if you're young or elderly, name it, whatever your cultural background is. That is something which I think is been very important to me. I think you can learn best from the mistakes you make. And would I do everything the same which I did? Yes, for sure. I think that has brought me to where I am today. I learned a lot from the mistakes I made. I want to respect others. I find it important to, if somebody reaches out to you, try to advise that individual. Of course, you cannot do that for everybody, because that's also an impossibility. And even if you want to, but it's at times a little bit too much. And I really, really hope that this conference has opened up the eyes for everybody, young or old, that this is a unique industry. It's really, I think once you're involved, you never want to leave it again. And there's an opportunity to achieve anything in life. And that's not only for this industry, but if you really believe in because some of people said, hey, we wanted to change the world, and we maybe didn't do that. But I think listening to all of the four ladies speaking here, I think everybody in its own, what is the word, merit, I think, in its own field has changed a part of the world and in a positive way. And I think that's how I really would like to end, by saying, hey, anything in life is possible, but please join this industry because it's an amazing one. Is that something you like, Sanjam?
That's absolutely perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Joshi, let's go with you. What advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Sanjam, I'll not say I'll give advice to my own 20-year-old self, because I'll again start climbing trees and enjoying life the way I've done all throughout, even though I've got a very serious role to play. But I keep the child in me alive, and I've recently done a TED talk. I would request everybody to go through that. That I think captures everything that I'm going to say now. So it's very important that no matter what position you achieve, how much of work you have to do, there has to be a child in you which has to be alive all the time, because it is that child which keeps a little amount of innocence, a little amount of curiosity, a little amount of playfulness, positivity. So I think having that child in you needs to be there, no matter, even if your hair go gray. So that child has to be alive in everybody. So every 20-year-old, when they are growing up, they have to ensure that the child stays alive. They shouldn't be in a hurry to grow up. Keep enjoying your childhood. The second thing I would like to say, a 20-year-old, so if you're trying to be specific to being a girl, I would say, just don't be conscious of the fact that you are a girl. Just believe that you are another human being. I think the girls themselves also need to get out of this gender manifestation. So it's not only the other side who is talking about it. We ourselves also become very conscious about it. So I think you just behave as if you are a human being, and just don't bother whether you are a girl or a boy. When you come for a job or when you are working, you are just a professional. And if you just behave like a professional, sooner or later you get accepted as a professional. And I think that is where I was trying to say, that you've got to make the other person comfortable. If you're professional in your approach, and if you don't try to bring too much of feminism onto the corporate shop floor, I'm sure you're going to get accepted. So that is the second advice that I'd like to give. Please, please don't be conscious of your gender. And I think that applies both to the men as well as to the women. We need to coexist together. We complement each other. We've got different skill sets and we are here to be together. So drop that difference consciousness. And the last thing which I'd like to tell them is, be your own self. Do not copy anybody. Don't try to imbibe anybody. Everybody has their own strengths, and we make a tremendous mistake in life when we start trying to copy others. And when you're trying to copy others, it never becomes your own second skin. You make a mess out of everything, because mentally you are somebody else. You're trying to imbibe and copy somebody else, and you make a big mixture of something, a cocktail, which eventually, I think, somewhere, and that applies very importantly in the 20s. So just be yourself. Ensure that whatever are your strengths, you work on your own strengths and downplay your weaknesses. And I'm sure all of you are going to make great success in life. Thank you so much, Sanjam, for this wonderful opportunity. And I'm really, really enthralled with the other three ladies which you helped me to meet. And I really look forward to a platform when all of us can really meet in person. I'm sure we're going to make a great gang. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we're waiting for Kathy now to give advice on this. I really want to know what advice she's going to give a 20-year-old self.
You know, a lot of things have resonated with me that my fellow panelists have already mentioned. And I think what I would say to myself is, respect and learn from everybody you meet, but be brave enough to make your own way and find your own way. Because exactly as we've just heard, there isn't one right way and one wrong way. There are many, many right ways, and it has to fit with myself. So at 20, I would tell myself, you know what, just trust you're going to get it right for you. You don't need to achieve what other people think you should be achieving. Achieve what's important to you, follow your own passion, and listen to compliments, because it's very hard to accept compliments, but listen to them and feel into what they're telling you so that you can then accept any offers of support that come from your network. And I think this is why SheEO is such an important concept, because I didn't realize this for the longest time, but having a network of people that you can grow with and learn from is so incredibly powerful, because each one of us has to make our own way in life. But when I was 20, I think I didn't quite understand that it was okay to do that. So having a network that strengthens me in knowing that everyone is doing it differently, but in the end, what comes out at the end is what counts. So do it your own way. And if it doesn't fit you, find another way of doing it. So I think at 20, I was very, very much in the German thinking still. I was thinking this was a right way of doing things. You had to get degrees, you had to do it a certain way, you had a certain career path. What I would say now is just trust that if you take opportunities, you work hard, and you take those challenges on that fit you and your passion, you're going to have a good outcome. And the network will help you. So cherish those people in your network and build those friendships, because they're really, really important.
Thank you so much. I think the way we're going to end this session is telling ourselves to be brave and to just chase our dreams. And I also particularly want to thank each one of you, because in my personal journey, you all have played a major role. So thank you all for being the wonderful women you are. And I think all women, if we are like that, if we are supportive, I think this is an amazing network to have, to build each other up, and let's all be maritime SheEOs.